Welcome to Skytech-Lens. Sometimes politics is about long, boring meetings and complicated policy documents, and sometimes it's about a politician pouring a perfectly good bottle of whiskey onto the ground. On September 2, 2025, Ontario Premier Doug Ford chose the second option. In a moment of pure political theater, he uncapped a bottle of Crown Royal and let the amber liquid soak into the earth. The video went viral almost instantly, over 5 million views in 48 hours. Ford framed the act as a stand for Canadian workers against aggressive U.S. tariffs. He wasn't just pouring out whiskey, he was pouring out frustration with a trade relationship that felt increasingly one-sided. The act connected with ordinary people in a way that spreadsheets and economic forecasts never could. You didn't need a degree in economics to understand it. A company was closing a Canadian plant, jobs were being lost, and a politician was mad about it. Ford urged Canadians to stop buying whiskey not made and bottled in Canada, turning a corporate decision into a patriotic cause. This single act transformed a local labor dispute into a nationwide rebellion. It became the opening shot in a much larger battle over trade, sovereignty, and national pride. Political scientists called it effective theater. Ford outmaneuvered even Donald Trump on public image. The whiskey spill wasn't just a stunt. It was a masterclass in modern political communication, setting the stage for a showdown that would ripple across continents. Before the viral videos, the story began with Heartbreak in a small Ontario town. In February 2025, Diageo announced it was closing its Crown Royal bottling plant in Amherstburg to move operations closer to the U.S. For the company, it was business. For the 160 workers, it was devastating. Generations had worked on that line, taking pride in packaging a product known as distinctly Canadian. Local businesses felt the impact immediately. Orders shrank, tourist traffic dried up. Amherstburg faced the slow hollowing out that so many industrial towns fear. But this was happening as U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods escalated, making the closure feel like part of a larger economic assault. Doug Ford stepped in and reframed the local pain as a national insult. The problem wasn't just Diageo, it was an unfair trade environment created by relentless American tariffs. If the U.S. was going to treat Canada like an adversary, Ford argued, Canadians needed to act accordingly. The fight was no longer about one town, it was about the dignity and economic future of the entire country. The stage was set for the protest to go from local to legendary. A small-town heartbreak became a national rallying cry. The consequences of this trade war didn't stop at the Canadian border. The Canadian boycott of American whiskey, sparked by Ford's protest, hit the U.S. spirits industry hard, a 65% drop in exports to Canada. Small distillers like Keith Clark in Tennessee watched thousands of bottles gather dust. The pain spread to American farms. Corn exports to Canada plunged by 45%. The American Farm Bureau warned that up to 3,000 family farms could face bankruptcy. Manufacturing suffered too. John Deere announced over 1,800 layoffs, citing falling demand and rising steel costs. The tariffs, meant to protect American industry, were now causing job losses at home. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce estimated tariffs had cost American companies and consumers over $110 billion since 2018. The interconnected North American economy meant a blow aimed at Canada boomeranged back. From Ontario to Iowa, ordinary people on both sides paid the price for a trade war they didn't start. The protest wasn't just a Canadian story, it was a North American tragedy. The whiskey pour echoed far beyond the border. Doug Ford's whiskey pour was the spark, but Canadians turned it into a wildfire. Social media exploded with hashtags like #BuyCanadianBrew and #CrownRoyalProtest. People posted photos buying Canadian spirits, leaving American brands on the shelf. Provincial liquor boards quietly reduced American whiskey orders. LCBO figures showed a 70% drop in U.S. whiskey sales. What started as a consumer choice became de facto policy. An Angus Reid poll found 54% of Canadians supported the boycott as a political message. The protest gave people a tangible way to participate in a fight that often felt abstract. The empty shelf space where Jack Daniel's used to sit sent a clear message. The Canadian market could no longer be taken for granted. The Canadian consumer had found their voice, and it was saying, "We'll take the Canadian club, thanks." The boycott became a symbol of national unity and economic power. Strip away the theater, and the numbers tell a dramatic story. For Canada's liquor industry, the boycott was a double-edged sword. Local distillers thrived, but the market lost over $500 million in revenue. U.S. exporters faced a perfect storm. New tariffs on 47 product categories added $160 billion in costs to the U.S. economy. U.S. inflation soared to 6.4%. Food and household goods prices spiked. The 50% tariff on Brazilian coffee doubled wholesale prices, hitting American consumers hard. Meanwhile, Canada's tariff-free imports of Brazilian coffee jumped by 25%. The contrast was stark. While Washington built tariff walls, Ottawa opened new doors. The economic data was clear. The tariff war hurt everyone, but the U.S. far more. A simple trip to the grocery store became a lesson in international economics. The trade war's real cost was paid by ordinary families on both sides of the border. While Ford grabbed headlines, Prime Minister Mark Carney played a quieter, strategic game. On September 1st, Ottawa lifted many retaliatory tariffs on CUSMA-compliant U.S. goods, a calculated reset, not a surrender. The goal: ease price burdens for Canadians and signal a willingness to negotiate. Ottawa kept heavy tariffs on key U.S. sectors like steel and aluminum, maintaining pressure. In April and May alone, Canada collected $2.5 billion in duties, money to support affected industries. The public appreciated the two-pronged approach: Ford's fiery defense and Carney's calm strategy. A U.S. federal appeals court ruled parts of Trump's tariff plan unconstitutional, giving Canada new leverage. Ottawa's reset, combined with this legal victory, shifted the balance of power. The country was united as never before. The legal and diplomatic fronts offered hope for a negotiated solution. Canada was playing chess, not checkers. As the U.S. relationship soured, Canada looked eastward. Prime Minister Carney's European tour secured new deals in energy, hydrogen and AI, $500 billion in future investment. By September, trade with the EU had risen 8% year-over-year. Canadian businesses diversified. A Montreal auto supplier found new orders from Germany and the Netherlands. Small clean tech firms in Quebec saw a 25% jump in European interest. The most dramatic move: Canada excluded U.S. firms from a massive submarine procurement, costing the U.S. defense industry up to 20,000 jobs. Carney linked the decision directly to the trade dispute. If Washington treats Canada as a trade adversary, it cannot expect to be rewarded in defense. The European pivot was a declaration of independence. Canada's loyalty was no longer unconditional. The trade war had redrawn the map of Canadian alliances. The Crown Royal boycott felt patriotic, but reality was more complicated. Diageo still employed over 500 Canadians at other facilities, including a major distillery in Manitoba. 80% of Crown Royal's grains came from Canadian farmers. Boycotts risked hurting them too. The protests put farmers in an impossible position: national pride versus economic survival. The global economy is deeply intertwined. It's rarely as simple as us versus them. The protests forced a conversation about what buying Canadian really means. Symbolic gestures can have complex, sometimes counterproductive effects. The challenge channeled patriotic energy into smarter, more targeted economic pressure. The whiskey protest was a powerful start, but also a lesson in the messy reality of global trade. The Great Whiskey Rebellion was about more than a bottle or a factory. It was a defining moment for Canada. The protests showed the power of ordinary people to shape national policy. A shopping list became a political statement, a boycott, a tool of foreign policy. The image of whiskey soaking into the ground became a symbol of a nation asserting its dignity. Canada's pivot to Europe marked a permanent shift. Exports to the U.S. fell from 73% to 67% in 7 months. The Ford whiskey protest will be remembered as the moment Canada toasted to a new identity. The country was no longer just America's neighbor, it was a sovereign nation, ready to fight for its interests. And that's something worth raising a glass to, preferably a Canadian one. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel for more updates.